Guest for the morning, Osei Bonsu Amwa was a one-time Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports. Thanks for joining me. He's also a Member of Parliament for Ikuapem South.
Thank you.
Very much into issues of World Cup, etc. But this year he decided not to talk about a World Cup. I even tried to go to Brazil.
We are now doing Commonwealth
I was trying to play it safe. Okay, and the next person is Horace Ni Ayi Ankra, who was one-time Chairman of the NDC, not in Ghana, for UK Ireland. When are you going back for your position?
Which position?
The UK Ireland position.
No. From day one, I said I was serving for a term, and I did just that.
Wow, you seem like a very consummate, polite, sincere politician.
Well,
he's enjoying Ghana more than UK. That's all.
Oh, okay. And talking about enjoyment, the president has been talking about how government will deal with economic issues. And according to the report, it's the first time he's reacting to the numerous labor agitations we witnessed the last week and before. And the president on page 3 said the economic challenges the country was going through were temporary, and expressed a hope that the tough measures taken by government to restore normalcy would start bearing fruit by the end of the year. He said matters concerning the economy and energy currently occupy the chunk of his time, adding, as a captain of the ship of state, I can assure you that the signs of recovery will manifest in the latter part of this year for all to see. Well, that's contrary to what the economists and the various analysts say about how the measures will manifest. He says we will work to stabilize the currency, bring down inflation and interest rates. Okay, if inflation will go down, it means prices of goods and services will also go down. Well, that's what it means, I think, economically. Okay, so I have to... true? You believe the president?
yes, certainly. I mean, it's reassuring that if all these demonstrations, agitations are ongoing, and then you get the captain of the ship to give you the confidence that you need, the hope that there is for you, then of course you have to believe it, because at the end of the day, you would always want to hear from whoever is leading you. I think that the whole thing was in a nutshell. I don't think that was the platform for President to be very, very detailed about steps that are being taken. But here again, you realize that he did mention two areas, especially energy, as one of the areas that has been taking a chunk of his time, because I believe that that is an area where Ghana is spending a lot of money, for example, to buy crude oil to get our power generated to us in our homes and in our workplaces. So I think yes, a good statement to give us hope, a good statement to tell Ghanaians that he's not sleeping, he's aware of the agitation that is going on, and I think somewhere in his address he also mentioned that for whatever is going on, it is a good sign of progress. What I'm trying to say here is that I think he was trying to say that for workers to come out to sort of like express their grievances like that in a very peaceful manner, it's also a sign that this country has actually moved on. So all in all, I think it's positive.
No, Obi, do you think it's becoming a lot more difficult for the president to explain himself? I'm asking this because after his speech, and especially on social media and also on the various news portals, what the reaction has been, that he's sounding like a broken record. If the measures were physical, they will be visible for everybody to see.
Well, thank you, and good morning to our viewers and to my friend here. He looks like a chief this morning.
Well, you also
forgot to say that apart from being former NDC chairman, he was a key member of the committee that sat on the World Cup to Brazil. Unfortunately, we are also not doing too well in Glasgow at the Commonwealth Games.
But what would that serve?
I tried to introduce sports into the whole thing before I go.
Yeah, you could do that straight away.
By saying that you look like a chief.
No, but to say that...
mischief, it's part of the mischief.
It's part of the mischief. Yeah.
No,
okay.
It helps in the discussion. To lighten the mood.
No, I'm not being mischievous.
Okay.
Not at all. We were talking about the president sounding like a broken record. Somehow, the average person doesn't believe in what politicians say now. It's because we keep repeating ourselves, we keep reassuring, and we don't seem to make headway. If you say that the present government has been in office for almost 2 years, if you add the 4 years of the first term, since 2009, some of these measures have been outlined. As to whether we've managed to really implement them, it's another matter. Let's take, for instance, if you read the supplementary budget or supplementary estimates, the finance minister has outlined certain measures. For instance, the generous waivers we give to companies who want to invest in this country. A company can come bring in funding to invest, and sometimes we give as much as $35 million as tax waivers. And as far back as 2009, Professor Mills made the statement in Parliament, the State of the Nation address, that this is an issue that we need to address. But as I sit in Parliament, every time that you see loans, you see grants, you see
all these waivers.
You see all these waivers.
Because
it's a huge thing.
Question them.
No, you question them. You question them, but you are outvoted. That's number one. Number two, utilities, fuel. The government said that there will be gradual price readjustment, and then to make sure that the average person doesn't feel it so much, it's cushioned. But sometimes government will wait for years, then they bring a huge thing onto the average consumer. Now, if you look at this inflation issue, even though the inflation is 15%, non-food inflation is 20%, and within the non-food inflation, 53.6% is on utilities, fuel, etc., etc. So the picture then is that there's so much being spent on these few items because we have not managed it well. So if the average worker is complaining, the average worker is complaining because you've given him 10% cost of living allowance, COLA. But inflation for non-food, especially utilities, is 53.6%. So obviously, he will complain. And if you look at the measures, there's a freeze on wage, the single spine is suffocating the government. So the government is looking at a situation where it will end up squeezing the average worker. So obviously they will go and complain. But if the president is saying that by the end of the year, everything will be okay, I think he's being highly optimistic.
Meaning what?
Highly optimistic in the sense that if you look at the way that the CD is falling against the major currencies, I don't think that by the end of the year we would have addressed this. If you look at the measures that the government themselves wants to put in place, made in Ghana goods, state institutions should make sure that they give contracts in cedis instead of foreign currency. Measures that government has repeated on and on and on, the government is not doing anything about it. I don't think that within the last 6 months, all these issues will be addressed for the government to say that everything has eased down and investment. Take the energy sector. Why are we importing so much crude when we have oil here and we have Tor?
You know the answer.
Why have we spent so much on Tor, but we don't seem to make any headway? To the extent that the workers of
Haven't you been told that Tor needs a huge capital injection? And if you draw up the mass, well, for the short term, this is the way to go.
Yes, but you need to fix it. And we've been talking about Tor since when?
Well, government has not said it's not going to fix it.
No, but the people at Tor are complaining that they are not seeing anything. That they think that Tor is a huge investment which is going waste. And if there are any measures, we need to even hear about measures about Tor. I don't find it even in the budget, in the supplementary estimates. So these are critical issues because when it comes to the energy sector, we are spending so much on importation of crude, and it's affecting everything. And you're spending so much on even interest payments, etc., etc. Oh, there's a central thing that we need to address. Otherwise, we'll be going round and making promises, and by the end of the year, let's say what would have been achieved.
Which parts of is it that we're just scratching the surface? For example, over the last 6 to 8 weeks, the speeches of various government officials who are ministers, as well as even the president, have been laden or laced with, well, if it's a Commander sugar factory, etc., that's expected to resolve the demand of sugar for the ordinary consumer, etc. If it's a investment in rice for farmers at the local level, etc. Do these, in its entirety, resolve the difficulties that we have about the deficit as far as the importation is, based on our demand and supply situations of consumables?
Well, these things are all steps that eventually will address the situation.
But steps are good, but if the foundation is solid, then it gives an indication of a better step that has been taken. Is that not it?
Oh yes, I mean we all are witnesses to the fact that government has actually laid certain foundations to address these matters. If you read the president's speech, I mean, he didn't say that by the end of the year things will drastically change. I mean, he was referring to the signs that will be seen as to better times ahead. So I don't think that president in his own wisdom would actually say that by the end of this year, because he is aware and he's accepted that we are in difficult times. But he's promised us that by the end of this year, we should see good signs. Now, industries like Commander Sugar Factory and projects like the West African gas pipeline, all these things, I mean, the gas pipeline that we have, they are all steps that will,
gas pipeline.
Yeah, they are all steps that will definitely address these situations. Now, if, for example, we are importing crude to the tune of about $3 million a day to sort of like power our generators and stuff like that to generate energy, and eventually we get gas that will be cheaper, obviously things will change. So we can also say, I mean, the simplistic form, that proper steps are being taken to address these matters. Now, these matters will never ever be addressed in a day. You and I know that some of these things, we've been mentioning them since the days of NLC and stuff like that. So good steps have been taken, and I believe that in the long run we'll see the benefits of us generating our own gas and other steps that government has taken.
Over the last week, the statistical survey just came out that the current inflation rate for production, that's the PPPI, is now 33.1%. Now, ultimately, as far as the economics are, it means that all these will be transferred to the consumer as far as pricing is concerned. That's huge. Coupled with the difficulties that they have with energy supply, which is erratic, and also very high as far as the rates are. It means that, well, the better times he's talking about perhaps may not be achieved in the next 2 quarters. Already we've begun the quarter.
Yeah, but then the signs will be seen by the end of this year. Now, having said that, I think that Ghana and most African countries have this sort of manner of addressing economic crisis or a fall in the value of the currency by actually pumping some monies into the system. I think recently we did pump about 20 million into the system.
We did that twice.
Yeah, and
still didn't solve anything. Actually,
it doesn't.
It wasn't the situation.
Yes, what it does is that it increases inflation in the long run. You understand? And it's been a problem with African countries. But then, I think at the end of the day, the economists, those who handle the economy, probably they know better than some of us do. But layman's view, when it comes to the economy of the country, I think certain steps, for example, the pumping of 20 million into the system recently, that's affecting inflation in the long run.
Now, you are in Parliament, and when you just went through the debate as far as the supplementary budget is concerned, and it was approved before you rose. You see that the steps in there perhaps are the best economic measures that we can have for the next 2 quarters before we see the light at the end of the tunnel by the close of the 2nd quarter.
Well,
that's the half that we have.
As I said, the measures were outlined. I said some of them had been said long ago, and we don't seem to make much progress towards achieving it. And the other aspect is the situation about employment. If the private sector is squeezed, the first step they take is that they cut down the number of people they can employ. And once people go home, there's no productivity, the tax revenue will go down, people are desperate, they resort to other measures to survive, and all these become serious situations. So once the private sector is not growing, the private sector is suffering because of energy, currency, all the other factors, what they do is that there will be more unemployment. And the government itself, in deciding to even attack or tackle unemployment, rather looks at the phantom situations, so-called PPP, end up with less debt, JIDA, SADA, SUBA, and those things, instead of concrete measures to provide permanent employment for the youth. If you say that you are importing sewing machines, dryers, etc., to set up less debt, train people, and then give them those.
But those are good measures. Perhaps if
that is, if you use them well. So, for instance, if
because, for example, if you equip somebody with machinery and that person has been trained adequately, the person is productive. Is that not it? Is that not the rationale behind those policies?
That's the rationale behind it. But how do you implement it? If for a whole year you spend 84 million Ghana cedis, which at that time was over $40 million for such a venture, for a year, and beyond that, the whole thing collapses. 2013, no budget for less debt. 2014, no budget for less debt. What have you achieved? Could you have invested the same $40 million or so in ventures that would be permanent enough for the youth to have employment? These are the situations. Because if
but in all this, we're talking about numbers, how you can reach enough numbers.
We're talking about employment, and as much as possible, permanent ones. Not the JIDA and less debt where you spend so much, at the end of the day, they are not sustainable. At the end of the day, the youth are still on the streets, and then you don't seem to have even any investment or feedback from what you have put in. It's very critical.
I do understand the concern you have, but as far as empowering people with vocational and technical training were concerned, the very traditional or artisanal way, the point is that in communities around the country, people have lived off those economic livelihoods or those means for decades, indeed all their lives. People have used those means to educate their children through school. So it's not as if it's negative, right? But
if
then
you invest so much and it's so short a time.
So then perhaps we have to question perhaps supervision and etc. But not necessarily the rationale for the program.
In this day and age where you're saying that we should patronize made in Ghana goods, 1, and 2, export so that we earn foreign currency. Would you rather not invest in situations where we can achieve this than to import sewing machines and things from China, and then after a year, those people you even gave those equipment to, most of them probably would have sold them because they don't have use for it, because the training is short, so much has gone into it. So
that's why I'm asking, don't you think that the moat then, because Mr. Horisankra, the point is everywhere in the world, employment figures or indicators are the driving force behind the benchmarks to measure whether a government or a system is working or not. So in the UK, for example, and you have been in more developed areas before around the world, if employment is being created, it gives a sense of measure of how the economy is performing, how the private sector is also contributing to growth.
Yeah, addressing unemployment is key in economic growth. But you see, this is my problem with certain aspects of politics. For example, when we talk about the GEDIs and all that kind of whatever, you could go to when it all started. Is it with NYEP or something like that? Yeah? By who? And what were the modules and what was the rationale behind it? And if it is as such today, how different would somebody else handle it? You get what I'm trying to say here? Something that is good, started by the NPP, yeah, but then we could find faults with these things today, but we don't have alternatives from whoever started it. Then, of course, you're not doing the right thing. I think what we want to look at is that the broad spectrum of addressing youth unemployment, and what I think is key. Now, if you look at Germany, that has what, 12%, no, 7% youth unemployment. Austria, the Netherlands, and those areas, compared to the whole of Europe, that has 27% youth unemployment. Now, what that tells you is that the countries that are listed, you realize that what they do is this high-tech kind of apprenticeship from the end of your last year or end of your high school, which will be SHS, the last year of SHS in this country, and then you go into apprenticeship. Now, what then happens is that whilst you are being trained in a particular manner, yeah, you get paid, and wherever you go to have that sort of training, that industry is also training somebody that eventually they would want to have. Now, what happens is that then this individual, the youth, will then have, let's say, the last year of SHS, going to and fro an industry and school. And then when it completes. And then from that SHS, he goes into that, let's say, TCCL, yeah? He's training. And then he has a program that he goes to Legon and has his program. So he finishes as a top technician at the same time with a university degree. And then what will then happen is that TCCL will have somebody that they really want as somebody who has been trained in a particular manner. Now, when you do that, from the last year of SHS, what happens is that this individual is having what? Training, education, experience. And of course, he or she is also being paid. Are you getting me? So you address all these things with just a simple kind of whatever. Now, it takes only AGI, for example, the Ministry of Education and government to actually look at something like that, and inculcate this sort of apprenticeship into our educational system. What will then happen is that you find out that it will address a whole lot of youth unemployment. GIDA and EYP and all sorts of things, yeah, good initiatives, yeah. But I think that at the end of the day, it all started with no legal backing, which was the genesis of all the problems that these establishments have. And at the same time, we also had corrupt individuals handling certain things, yeah? Because somebody showed me some documents the other time, and I was saying to myself, wow, you know, forms of people who are supposed to have been trained as computer, whatever, they were supposed to be disabled, which I know them to be able-bodied people. You understand? Now, when we are not sincere like that as leaders of certain establishments to make sure that people benefit, then of course we all raise up our head when we say, oh, and the president, and the president. So it's not as if the concepts are wrong. The point is that we need to consolidate what we have. Yeah, the concepts are not wrong at all. Do the amendments and the changes. No,
for instance, if you talk about...
So we have the solutions, don't you?
If you talk about NYEP that he's bringing in, we have models. And if you don't restrict the models, initially the models were to train teachers, nurses, etc. But somehow we abandoned that, or we downplayed it, and then focused on just recruiting people and to get them paid. You have, as he's saying, you have situations where it's for the youth, where you have people 50, 60 claiming to be youth and then accessing these facilities. What I'm saying is that we're saying the same thing more or less. So we abandon the initial ideas. Yeah, the kind of investment you make is what make what we are doing sustainable. All right. Now that the president is giving all these assurances, it means that we need to see something by the close of. He's saying that by the end of the next 2 quarters, we should be seeing the signs manifesting. Well, he has said it, but we need to see more on the ground. I mean, it's the same president who said that any procurement above 5 million should come to the presidency. It's the same president who said that. What have we done with our procurement rules and laws? How consistent are we with our procurement issues? Because government is the biggest spender. And if for anything that you can buy, you have to spend 5 times more, then you have a problem. So some of these issues, we've said them over and over again. As to how we will address them, we need to see something concrete on the ground. Otherwise, it becomes talk shop. One group will come and say it, another group will just come and...
All right.